Hello, welcome to the Williston Development Review Board meeting of July 25th, 2023. My name is John Hemmelgarn, Vice Chair of the DRB, and I'll be chairing the meeting here this evening. This is a hybrid meeting taking place in the Town Hall Annex Conference Room and virtually on Zoom. All members of the board and the public can communicate in real time. Planning staff will provide Zoom instructions for public participation before we begin. All votes taken in this meeting will be done by roll call vote in accordance with the law. If Zoom crashes, this meeting will be continued to August 8th, 2023. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance of all DRB members participating in the meeting. Nate Andrews is not here. Paul Christensen. Present. Lisa. Present. Braden Carter. Scott Riley. Yep. David Turner. Here. John Hemmelgarn is here. Pete Kelly is not participating in the meeting. So we have 5 members, and therefore we have a quorum. I suppose I should say that we called this meeting to order at 7:11. We have just one item on the agenda tonight, BP 23-17. 3JT LLC requests a discretionary permit to subdivide a 4.4 acre lot into 3 separate lots. So the first item on our agenda is the public forum, where the public has opportunity to speak on topics that are not on the agenda. Is there anyone in person? Oh, we should do the Zoom instructions if we have anybody on.
Oh, right, yep. So for our online attendee, you're already signed in. Please keep yourself on mute when you're not speaking. Camera on or off is at your discretion. If you would like to comment, you can press the raise hand button on the toolbar or let us know in the chat. So far, seeing no chats and no raised hands for public comment.
Okay, great. So we'll move on to our public hearing of BP 23-17. We will call this hearing, we'll open this hearing at 7:14. So who's here to represent the applicant? Abby.
I am Abby Derry from Trudell Consulting Engineers.
Great. And address?
478 Blair Park Road.
Thank you. So, Emily?
Yep. So this is a request for a discretionary permit to subdivide an existing parcel into 3 parcels. Lot 1 would be 2.61 acres and would contain the existing building that's present on the site. Lot 2 would be about 0.8 acres. It fronts along Route Way, where we anticipate a building in the near future. And then lot 3, mislabeled here as lot 4, actually lot 3 would be 1.14 acres. It would be towards the rear end of the parcel. It'll remain parking for now. This property is in the Taft Corners zoning district, but more importantly, the form-based code overlay district. And the purpose of this subdivision is to create parcels that comply with the dimensional requirements of form-based code. So currently the property has a commercial use on it, an existing office building with a bank and a bank drive-through. No new uses are being proposed at this time. It's merely the subdivision. And the property has access on a state highway. It was not subject to design or conservation commission review. Tonight, staff is recommending that you take testimony and close the hearing, deliberate, and make an approval. We're recommending approval with the addition of condition number 12. Project history, this is the first time the DRB is reviewing this subdivision. You may recall in October of 2020, a pre-application review for a 7,600 square foot 2-story building that would be located along Route 2A. That project never moved forward through permitting. However, this subdivision is anticipation in a building in that similar area in the future. Public Works comments are included. They're mainly about needing clarifying information about utilities and stormwater billing. The fire department did not have comments. Interdepartmental comments as they pertain to site development would be handled through the certificate of conformity process. No comment letters were received at the time of mail out, July 20th, nor were any comment letters received to date. I do note that a certificate of conformity application is anticipated for lot 2, but it has not been filed, and that's the administrative design and permitting process for buildings and site development under form-based code. The underlying Taft Corner zoning district does not have a minimum lot size for this district, so compliance anticipated there. The proposed subdivision complies with the subdivision platting requirements and final plan requirements. And then one condition is added to ensure compliance with the form-based code. What's shown on the screen is an excerpt of the regulating plan map. This roughly 4.5 acre parcel has access onto Route 2A, and they share a driveway with the abutting property to the north. The regulating plan envisions that shared access driveway to be redeveloped into a street. Shown on the regulating plan is Bruce Ave. This parcel is bisected on the north-south on the up-down on this map by Polly Lane, which is shown in hatching as a tier 2 street. So we're not anticipating or requiring the construction of Polly Lane as part of this subdivision or as part of the future development of lot 2. It may be required if and when lot 3 or lot 1 come in for redevelopment. And the subdivision that's being proposed doesn't preclude the development of Polly Lane. The western edge of the existing parking building, of the existing office building on lot 1 does partially extend into the Polly Lane right of way, and that's why it's shown as that tier 2 street, because it conflicts with an existing structure. Blocks and alleyways, so the subdivision plat and boundaries comply as proposed. We are adding a condition related to an alleyway. So form-based code says streets must be interconnected. There must be alleyways in the middle of blocks. This property shares a block with 2 abutting properties to the south, where a bank is currently, and that partially proposed Aldi grocery store was reviewed. So
If I could ask a quick question.
Mhm.
If you go back to Polly Lane, that was part of, I assume that was part of the original mapping that you did for, in advance of form-based code.
Yes, it was added to the map or adopted as part of the form-based code.
So why would the right of way of Polly Lane extend into the existing building if you knew the building was there?
Mhm.
Why wouldn't you have moved it to the side so it didn't conflict with it?
So in a few places in Taft Corners, we had blocks that were overly long based on the principles. we
And
were
the
trying
office
to-
building block is
Right.
overly long?
Correct.
Okay.
So this block without something dividing it is long. And if you put that street, Polly Lane, completely out of the building or start to try to move it reasonably away from it, you create an overly long block and a short
Yeah,
block.
short one.
So the
Yeah.
solution we came up with was that sometimes we would put streets on the regulating plan that intersected with an existing building. And we didn't want to give those the same force in the review process as streets that were over an existing driveway or just over undeveloped land.
Mhm.
So that hatching, the designation as a level 2 street or a tier 2 street says this is a street that's required if the building that's in the way of it is demolished and redeveloped, essentially.
So
Um,
then, okay, so take that one step further, then you said as part of your analysis, that they're required to build it.
No,
No.
they're not required.
They're not required. to build it.
Mhm.
They're not required to build it. They would only be required to build it if they were redeveloping the lot with that building on it. If the lot in the rear with the parking
Assuming
lot,
they
they
tore the
would,
building down, but they wouldn't be required to tear the building
Right.
down. But if they did tear the building down,
right,
they could not rebuild up to the same point that it was at.
right. They would need to accommodate Holly Lane. We, another example of this, if anybody's familiar with where Ashley Furniture is, in Ware Park, there's a level 2 street that runs straight through the Ashley Furniture building, to come out and connect to Route 2. That would only be required if that entire site was redeveloped and the building demolished. Another example runs down the backside, of the Taft Corner Shopping Center, right behind the Hilton Stormwater Pond. Only if that entire site was redeveloped would that street, be required as part of the development pattern there. So there's just places where to come up with the block pattern, we needed to draw a street, but it was in conflict with existing development. Where you didn't want to require it unless essentially the lot was being scraped and restarted from scratch.
And that's what you're calling tier 2 streets.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yep. So the subject parcel highlighted in blue, it shares this overall block with 2 abutting parcels to the south. So this overall block is bounded by Route 2A on the east, Wright Avenue on the south, Future Trader Lane along the west, and then Bruce Avenue along the north. In order for this to comply with form-based code, there needs to be an internal alleyway that runs either north-south or east-west along this property boundary. And then if the neighboring properties ever come in to develop, they would build their portion and connect into the alleyway system. So that's what condition number 12 is saying, that the plat needs to show the alleyway on the plan.
I'm sorry, and where would that alleyway be?
So the way I have condition number 12 worded, and then I'll jump back to the map. Designate an alleyway, or at minimum half an alleyway, along the property line between proposed lots 1 and 2 and the abutting properties to the south. So it would be along here. It would come out and have frontage along Route 2A. However, we're not requiring them to connect through to Route 2A. When that building is developed, we know that the state is gonna say, no, you can't have something coming out on the state highway. So that alley would probably, dead end before it gets to the right of way of the state. But it would,
But this won't affect the new building they're talking about putting on lot 2? Or are you gonna have an alley going right through the middle of that?
It's going right through the existing office building too, right?
Right, and so you're expecting to have an application in at some point in time for a building that's gonna front Route 2, right?
Mhm.
And if you go back to that, you're showing an alley. You're showing an alley right through the middle of that parcel.
And the line is the parcel.
Is that right in my,
So we're down here.
are you down there?
Yeah, so we're between this lot and North Hill Savings Bank to the,
Okay,
south.
all right,
Mhm.
so I guess I'm looking at it through
Where
the,
that little building is.
So the idea is this subdivision would designate basically half an alley along its property line. Such that, if we're, as redevelopment proceeds, an alley could eventually be created. That comes out at T.
so it would be the southern line of the blue line.
Yep,
Right,
bottom of the blue
correct.
line, yep.
All right, got it.
Yep,
Yeah, so that blue line is this line, and on the plat, it shows 25-foot easement to NET, so that dashed line, the alley would run somewhere along in there.
Got it, okay. Welcome to the form-based code.
well, the thing about it is that there are a lot of these infrastructure pieces that happen in small steps. First, plan for it, accommodate it, more redevelopment happens, eventually it becomes necessary to build it, to either provide access or make properties work together. So we're at those very early stages where you're gonna see plats that identify things that don't really do anything for the development or get built out. They just get identified in anticipation of future redevelopment and shared access between properties. So if the adjacent property doesn't redevelop for 20 years, that line just sort of sits there on paper, until that time.
Mhm.
And we also know that in the case where an alley is designated that comes out to state highway, we're not going to see a connection to that unless the town, in the distant future takes over jurisdiction over that state highway. We've been told that essentially flatly by V-Trans. So we accept that. We have functional access from, the existing drive that would begin to be built as a street. We're fine that way, but we're planning ahead.
So it follows our findings of facts, conclusions of law, and conditions of approval, all are boilerplate except the addition of condition number 12, and a motion for approval.
Great. Thank you. So, Abby, I assume you read these conditions,
Yes,
so, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I will only add that the subdivision is based on future development of lot 2. And that working with the proposal that will be coming into the town and the northern east-west future Bruce Ave right of way was developed based on that future Bruce Ave right of way on the regulating plan. And that is all I really have to add. The conditions of approval are acceptable, and I don't have any problems with any of them except number 7. I'm wondering about the obtaining necessary sewer allocation, or if that carries with the development of the lot versus a subdivision.
Yeah, that's a boilerplate one that we could have struck, but it'll be NA because it's just a subdivision.
Okay.
So if the DRB wanted, they could strike that condition.
Yeah, it just says prior to obtaining any administrative permit, so it would be before you get a permit to build a building, you've got to have the sewer allocation.
Yeah, just wanted to clarify, I didn't need allocation for a weekend lot.
Nope.
Mhm.
That's all I have.
So, all right, I'll open this up to the board for any questions.
I was wondering about the bank parking requirements and whether or not splitting off that other lot is a problem at all. And there's plenty of parking from passing by there, but what are the rules around parking for the bank?
Right.
The form-based code does have some parking requirements that we'll look at when a building is proposed. The one thing in just sort of talking with the applicant about future development on this parcel that I did say is there's a lot of parking on this lot. There's a small amount of it that's in what will become the setback to the new street, Bruce Avenue, and that we didn't want to count that parking since it's non-conforming towards the necessary parking on the site. But the code allows for a fairly minimal amount of parking and lets the applicant kind of work up from there depending on what they think their needs are. So for the development that this subdivision might create, there's plenty of parking within the code and functionally, we would have to keep, every time something new is proposed out there, we would have to go back and look at shared parking and how it's all being managed. We have commercial and residential and shared and reserved parking requirements for this district that all kind of interact with one another. And we would just look at it each time something's proposed.
That the bank's good for now.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So in other words, lot 2 is literally gonna have all shared parking with somebody else. Cause there is not a lot of spaces on 0.8 acres,
Well, so,
which got a building on it.
the code strongly encourages folks to park underneath buildings. So you'll likely see some structured parking, with a lot of new proposals out there. And for any residential use, there's some minimum reserved parking. In other words, there needs to be parking that's reserved for the residential use. And then some can spill over into shared if there's a mixed use building with commercial. And it's okay if it's on an adjacent lot, I guess, since we're looking at a subdivision, there's nothing about subdividing a parking lot that says you can't share across lot lines. You absolutely can.
Paul?
That was it.
That was it. So I guess open up to anybody in the audience who would have a question. Let's see. 100% of them shaking their head no.
Yeah, and if you're on Zoom and you'd like to comment, you can let us know in the chat or press the raise hand button. Our online attendee has done neither.
Okay, so. One last chance? Anybody here to comment? If so, then I am going to close this hearing at 7:31. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna ask board members whether you feel there's a need to go into deliberative session here. Anybody, if any one person does, we will.
I don't think.
I don't know me either.
No, we'll let it go.
So if that is the case, I would ask if anybody has a motion.
You are on video, you know that.
I know.
Oh, okay.
Right there.
I'll remote.
Thank you. Scott.
Okay, as authorized by WBD 6.6.3, I, Scott Riley, move that the Williston Development Review Board, having reviewed the application submitted and all accompanying materials, including the recommendations of the town staff and the advisory board, required to comment on this application by the Williston Development Bylaw, and having heard and considered the testimony presented at the public hearing of July 25, 2023, accept the findings of fact and conclusions of law for DP 23-17, and approve this discretionary permit subject to the conditions of approval above. This approval authorizes the applicant to file final plans, obtain approval of these plans from staff, and then seek an administrative permit for the proposed development, which must proceed in strict conformance with the plans on which this approval is based.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Dave Turner seconds. So before we vote, is there any further discussion on this item?
No.
All right, well then we'll call the vote. Paul Christensen,
Aye.
Lisa Braden Harder,
Aye.
Scott Riley.
Aye.
David Turner,
Aye.
the chair is an aye. So we have 5 ayes, 0 noes. Motion passes. Thank you. Don't believe there's any communication, final plans or other business tonight, so
The minutes.
the minutes, we need to approve the minutes. Do I have a motion for that?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of Tuesday, June 27th, 2023 as written.
Thank you, Dave. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Paul seconds that. Let's go through the votes there. Oh, I should say any discussion on that? Paul.
Aye.
Aye. Lisa.
Aye.
Scott.
Aye.
David.
Aye.
There's an aye, again, 5-0. Thank you all. Motion to adjourn this meeting.
Still moved.
Have a good evening.
Record.